I was still holding my corsage when she said it. Right there in front of the sweetheart table, in front of the photographers, the DJ, and every single guest who'd come to celebrate what was supposed to be the happiest day of my son's life. Her dress sparkled under the reception lights, hairpinned makeup flawless, but her voice cold, sharp, and loud enough for anyone within 20 feet to hear cut through the laughter like a blade. "You don't belong here. Get out." She didn't whisper it. She didn't pull me aside or wait until the music covered it. She said it as if she were announcing the next dance, as if she were calling attention to a stray animal that had wandered in. And my son, Nathan, he stood beside her, frozen, mouth slightly open. Not shocked enough. Not enough. "Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel, and if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip, because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself." I stood there for a moment, corsage in hand, unsure if I'd heard her right. She didn't flinch, just stared at me, eyes narrow and triumphant, like she'd been waiting for this moment, like this was the part of the show she'd been rehearsing in the mirror for months. All I could hear behind me were murmurs, forks clinking against plates that suddenly weren't important anymore. A few people gasped. Some turned away. No one stood up for me. I didn't say anything, didn't storm out, didn't cry, didn't plead. I simply turned. Walked past the guests, past the florals I'd paid for, past the photographer I'd hired, and past the cake that hadn't even been cut yet. That cake. The one I'd insisted on upgrading from buttercream to fondant because she said it photographed better. All of it. My money, my heart, my son. Now in someone else's hands. I didn't go far, just outside near the catering vans where I could breathe again, where no one would look at me like I was the villain in her story. I stared up at the sky. It was a pale kind of blue that evening, just beginning to fade. A breeze moved through the trees, and for a second, I could almost hear my husband's voice. He would have told me to walk away with dignity, that some things aren't worth begging to keep, that a woman like Jessica only wins when you play her game. And I don't play games, not anymore. I stood there for a while. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Long enough for the music to start back up. Long enough for no one, not even my son, to come find me. I took off the corsage, tucked it into my purse, walked to my car, heels clicking against the pavement. The bouquet she handed me before the ceremony left it on the hood of someone else's rental. I didn't drive home yet. I sat in the front seat engine-off purse in my lap, and I opened the Notes app on my phone, and I began typing. Not an angry rant, not a list of grievances, a checklist. I made a checklist. Everything I paid for, everything still pending, everything that was still in my name. And when I got home after a long, silent drive through the suburbs, I made phone calls. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I just asked questions, confirmed invoices, reviewed balances, and where it made legal and financial sense, I canceled every single thing. Venue balance unpaid. I'd put the deposit down, not the final payment. Canceled. Caterer. I had the card on file. Called and revoked it. Photographer not paid in full. Contacted him directly. Explained the situation. He was sympathetic. Said he wouldn't release the photos until the balance cleared. That dress, That dream dress she wore when she told me to leave custom alterations paid in full by me on my department store credit account. Disputed the charge. And the honeymoon, the all-inclusive resort in Turks and Caicos, guess who booked it through her travel agent friend and used my rewards number gone. Every reservation, every upgrade, every champagne on arrival, gone. Not out of spite, out of principle. You don't publicly humiliate someone who paid for your wedding. You don't treat the woman who raised your husband like she's an inconvenience to your spotlight. You certainly don't tell her she doesn't belong. Because I did belong. Every flower, every table setting, every chair cover tied with satin ribbon, I paid for it. Quietly, willingly. Because I loved my son. Because I thought I was investing in a future I'd be welcome in. I didn't ask for recognition. I didn't need applause, but respect. That was the one thing I couldn't compromise anymore, especially not now. Not after everything I'd survived. Not after raising Nathan alone for 20 years after his father died. Not after giving up vacations, sleep, peace of mind, so that one day I could stand at his wedding and say, "We made it." I didn't stand there to be told to get out. No. She'd picked the wrong woman to dismiss. The next day, the phone calls started. The venue, the planner, even Nathan. I didn't answer any of them. I needed them to feel it. The silence. The consequences. And this was just the beginning. Because the thing about quiet women, when we finally speak, we don't raise our voices. We raise the ground you stand on. My story didn't begin at the wedding. It began long before that, before the venue contracts and the guest lists and the color palettes and the whispers. It began when I first held Nathan in my arms, his little fists clenched, his eyes scrunched so tight like the world was already too bright. He came into my life a month after his father left it. Gary. My husband wasn't supposed to go that young. Heart attack. Sudden. One moment he was asking me about dinner, and the next he was gone on the kitchen floor. I didn't cry at the funeral. Not because I wasn't devastated, but because I had a baby to feed, a mortgage to figure out, and grief that didn't have time to fall apart. Nathan became my world, not in the pretty Hallmark way people like to throw around, in the raw, bone-tired, paycheck-to-paycheck, frozen pizza nights kind of way. I went back to work 6 weeks after Gary died, administrative assistant by day, delivery driver by weekend. And Nathan, he never lacked love, but he did lack luxury. I made that trade without regret. I didn't date. I didn't travel. I didn't throw big birthday parties. But I showed up to every school concert, every spelling bee, every parent-teacher night, even when I was running on 3 hours of sleep and microwave coffee. He never once saw me falter. And when he graduated college first in our family to do so, I clapped so hard my palms stung for hours. I gave him everything I had. And when he met Jessica, I tried. Lord, I tried. She came into our lives 3 years ago, pretty confident, always on. The kind of girl who says, "I love your blouse," and doesn't mean a word of it. Nathan lit up around her. I saw it immediately, and I wanted to believe in that light. I told myself it was the usual tug of war, mothers letting go, sons growing up, the natural shift. But this wasn't a shift. It was a quiet erasure. At first, Jessica was sweet, a little too sweet. Always complimenting, always smiling, but never asking real questions, never listening. She started calling me Evie instead of Mom, like she knew that distance made her stronger. I invited them to dinner every Sunday. They came for a while. Then came the excuses. Work, brunch plans, needing just a weekend to reset. I understood. I didn't push. But each month that passed, I saw Nathan slip further away. When they announced their engagement, Jessica's mother called me before Nathan did. She was polite, efficient, and somehow managed to make me feel like a guest at my own son's future. "I'm so glad you'll be part of this journey," she said, like I was a vendor, not a parent. I offered to help, not because I needed to be involved, but because I wanted to make it easier on them. I offered money for the dress. She accepted. I offered to cover the deposit for the venue. She accepted. I upgraded the catering package when Nathan mentioned they couldn't quite stretch for it. She thanked me with a text message. One emoji. A heart. I swallowed it. All of it. Because I told myself this was for him. For Nathan. I watched as Jessica planned everything with her mother, with her sisters, with her college friends. I asked once if I could help with centerpieces. She said they had a vibe already picked out. I offered to host a small engagement party at my house. She said they'd rather keep it contemporary. Still. I paid. Still. I smiled. Until the rehearsal dinner. That's when I saw it. The way she touched his arm, possessive, not affectionate. The way she corrected him in front of everyone when he mispronounced the name of the officiant. The way her mother leaned in close to me at the end of the night and said, "We're just so thrilled to finally have him in the family." Finally. As if my 27 years of raising him, protecting him, pouring my entire soul into him hadn't counted. And Nathan? He smiled, nodded, didn't even notice the shift, didn't want to. I went home that night and cried in the car. Not because I was losing him, but because I'd already lost him. And the wedding day. It was the final nail. When she told me to leave, when he didn't stop her, I knew this wasn't about one argument. It was about every moment leading up to it. All the little dismissals, all the silent rejections, all the ways I'd been slowly replaced, repackaged, rewritten. But that's the thing about women like me. We remember. Not with rage, but with clarity. We don't yell. We undo. And while they celebrated that night without me, I started writing my list. I pulled out receipts, bank statements, contracts, and I remembered every dollar that held my son's name, every cent that propped up her fantasy, and I knew if she wanted me out, then she'd have to earn her way in. It started with the seating chart, a simple thing, really, but that's when I first noticed it. Jessica and I had been sitting in her apartment, well, their apartment now, after she invited me over to help with some final touches. I thought it meant something. Maybe she was finally letting me in. Maybe the wall was coming down. But it wasn't inclusion. It was performance. She handed me a glass of wine and a fake smile, then pulled out a laptop. "I figured you could help me with a few tweaks," she said. I smiled. "Of course." I leaned in to look, and that's when I saw it, my name. Not Mom, not mother of the groom. Just Evelyn Patterson, row 3, table 8. Next to a couple of her co-workers I didn't even know. I said nothing at first, just studied it. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Her parents were front and center, so were her aunts, her best friends, even some of her college roommates. But me, I might as well have been staff. I gently asked, "Did you want me sitting a little closer to the front?" She gave a small laugh. "Oh, no offense. We just thought it would be better to space out the tables for pictures, plus your table's by the buffet." By the buffet. She said it like it was a privilege. Like I should thank her for seating me near the potatoes instead of my son. Nathan wasn't home at the time, some work dinner, she said, so I just nodded. "Looks great," I said. and she smiled like she'd won something. That was the moment I knew I wasn't losing my place in the family. I'd already lost it. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, the small things began to pile up. Every time I offered help, I was given a task with no meaning. Could you drop off these checks? Would you mind confirming the florist? Actually, can you just call the hotel about early check-ins? I was a personal assistant, not a mother. When I asked if I could contribute something personal, a family recipe for the dessert table, maybe a small heirloom for Jessica to carry, she laughed. Not kindly. Oh, I think we're going for a more curated look. Curated. As if love was a brand she was launching. As if I was just some outdated product that didn't fit the aesthetic. Nathan, he didn't see it. Or he didn't want to. He was busy. Distracted. Always handling something. Always saying, "Just let her take the lead, Mom. It's her dream day." I wanted to scream sometimes, shake him, ask him where my son had gone, but I didn't. Because love means patience. At least that's what I'd always believed. Until I saw what patience was costing me. And then there was the dress. I'd taken Jessica shopping, not because she asked me to, but because Nathan hinted that she'd appreciate it. I paid for the dress, a down payment and 3 rounds of alterations. She twirled in the mirror, smiled, and said, "It's everything I wanted." I smiled back despite the tightness in my chest. But a month later, I overheard her telling one of her friends at brunch that her mother had gifted her the dress. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did, and I didn't correct her, because by then I'd realized the truth. Jessica was rewriting the narrative, one polite smile at a time. She wasn't marrying into a family, she was replacing one. Then came the bridal shower. I wasn't invited. Not really. Jessica posted photos later, pink balloons, catered lunch gifts stacked high. Her mother's sister's bridesmaids. No seat for me. When I asked Nathan about it, he blinked. "Wait, you didn't go." She never told me when or where I said. He looked stunned. Maybe he genuinely didn't know. Or maybe he'd learned to pretend. That was the weekend I stopped baking casseroles for them, stopped texting to check in, stopped pretending I hadn't already been dismissed. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was awake, and with every small cut I got clearer. This wasn't about a wedding, it was about power, control, erasure, and Jessica. She was winning. Until she made one mistake. She thought I would stay quiet forever. But what she didn't understand, what Nathan had forgotten, is that I built my entire life from silence, from swallowing grief, from budgeting fear, from ironing out pain so it wouldn't wrinkle anyone else's day. And that kind of woman, when she finally speaks, she doesn't yell, she acts. So I started paying attention. I logged every payment, every email, every invoice tied to my name. Because if I was going to be erased from their story, then they wouldn't get to keep the pages I paid for. I didn't fight back. Not right away. I let her think she'd won. I smiled when she dismissed me. I nodded when she pretended I wasn't in the room. I even thanked her when she handed me a vendor invoice I'd already paid twice over. I became invisible on purpose. Because when people like Jessica stop seeing you, they start slipping. And I was counting on that. Every family dinner I sat at the far end of the table. Every gathering I brought something store-bought. No more effort, no more homemade pies with hand-cut crusts. Not because I was bitter, but because I was done offering sweetness to a table that had lost its appetite for kindness. And slowly I began watching. Not just her behavior, his. Nathan had changed. Not drastically, not in the obvious ways, but in the small, subtle shifts that told me she was molding him like clay behind closed doors. He stopped calling me mom and started saying my mother in a tone that suggested I was a task to be managed. He stopped asking my opinion on anything and began telling me what they'd already decided. And the worst part? He didn't notice he was doing it. One night I dropped off a check for the florist, yes, another one I was footing the bill for, and heard them arguing through the door. Not screaming, just tension, enough that you could feel it in your teeth. "She keeps inserting herself," Jessica hissed. "You said she'd stay out of it." "She's just trying to help," Nathan mumbled. "She's in the way, Nathan. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're not ready for this." I stepped back from the door, didn't knock, just left the check under the mat and went home. That night I made another list, not a checklist of payments this time, a timeline. Every instance, every comment, every cold shoulder and passive-aggressive smile. Not because I needed proof for anyone else, because I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. When you're dismissed long enough, you start to question your own memory, your own intentions, your own worth. But I was done questioning. Now I was documenting. At the next dress fitting, I stayed quiet while Jessica complained about the seamstress. "She just doesn't get my body type," she said loudly, not caring that the poor woman was within earshot. "I mean, why is it so hard to sew in a straight line?" I looked up from my chair. "You look beautiful," I said calmly. She blinked, probably surprised I'd spoken at all. Then she smiled. Not kindly. "Thanks, Evelyn. You're sweet when you're quiet." I said nothing else the rest of the fitting, just stared at her in the mirror. Wondered how someone so polished could be so proud of a soul that mean. Back at home, I checked the invoice for the alterations. Paid. By me. I made a note to call the credit company later that week. As the wedding approached, I kept observing. Jessica spent more time on social media than with Nathan. She planned photo ops more than she planned conversations. Her Instagram looked like a catalog, him in a matching suit, her holding his face like a trophy. They weren't partners. They were props. And my son. He was smiling in every photo, but not one of those smiles reached his eyes. I stopped offering to help, stopped reminding him to rest, to eat, to breathe. Let her take over completely. And still, I paid. Because a part of me still believed he'd come to his senses, that he'd remember who raised him, that when the music stopped, he'd hear my voice again. But the music never stopped. It only got louder until it drowned me out. And by the time we got to the wedding day, I was ready. Not broken, not bitter, just ready to let go of the version of him I'd been holding on to accept that sometimes even the people we love the most can get so lost in someone else's storm that they forget who held the umbrella in the rain. So when she told me to leave, when she publicly told me to get out, I didn't flinch. Because I already had. Emotionally. Financially. Quietly. The only thing left was the follow-through. And I was very, very good at follow-through. Because what they both forgot is that the silent woman in the corner, she's usually the one with the receipts. The Monday after the wedding, I put on a fresh pot of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table with a pen, a notepad, and every document I'd carefully filed over the past 6 months. Receipts, emails, contracts, confirmation numbers, every detail logged and time-stamped. Because Jessica thought I was just a mom with a checkbook. She didn't realize she was dealing with a widow who had once learned to navigate mortgage applications, funeral paperwork, and medical insurance all in one afternoon while holding a crying baby in her arms. I wasn't vengeful. I was meticulous. And now I was done pretending. First call the resort in Turks and Caicos, Jessica's dream honeymoon. It was booked under my name with my points. She asked me to handle it months ago, saying she was too overwhelmed with wedding details. Said she'd send me the reimbursement later. She never did. The reservation was still active. Check-in was tomorrow. I canceled it. No refund required because I'd booked with reward points and a promotional deal. She'd been bragging to her friends about the ocean view suite. I smiled and crossed it off the list. Next, the photographer, a lovely young man named Colin. I liked him instantly when I first met him at the venue preview. Kind eyes, soft-spoken. I gave him a call. "Hi, Colin. This is Evelyn Patterson, Nathan's mom." He paused. "Oh. Hi, Mrs. Patterson. I wanted to make sure you didn't release the full wedding gallery yet." "No, ma'am. I'm still editing. Should have proofs done by Friday." "Wonderful. Just to confirm the remaining balance hasn't been paid." "No, I'm still waiting on that final installment." I nodded to myself. "Hold off then. I've decided I won't be covering that final payment." Another pause. "Understood. And if they ask, you can let them know why." He hesitated again, but his voice was respectful. "I will. Thank you, Colin." I hung up. No anger. No raised voice. Just consequences. I worked my way down the list. The live band deposit only. The event planner final payment pending. The caterer I'd paid in full, big mistake, but I sent them a message anyway. Not to cancel. Just to let them know what happened at the reception. In case Jessica or her family decided to dispute anything later. Because a woman like that doesn't stop when the cake's been cut. She keeps rewriting the story. I was rewriting it back. By noon, I'd made 8 calls and scheduled 2 meetings, and I wasn't done yet. I walked into the spare bedroom, what used to be Nathan's childhood room. His trophies still lined the top shelf, the faded posters, the old desk with the chipped corner. I opened the closet and pulled out the box I hadn't touched in years. Bank statements, legal forms, a file marked Nathan's future. Inside it was a notarized document from years ago naming me a co-trustee on the savings account I'd quietly built for him since high school. Money I'd saved from every tax refund, every bonus, every side job. He didn't even know how much was in there. And guess what? Jessica didn't either. I called the bank, had them freeze it. Indefinitely. No one would be accessing that account until I was convinced it wouldn't be used to fund yoga retreats or investment opportunities in someone's friend's skincare line. By the end of the day, I was tired, but not defeated. I made tea, sat on the porch, and waited. The first call came that evening. Nathan. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Hey, Mom. We need to talk. Jessica says some of the payments didn't go through. The resort called us. She's really upset. Can you call me back?" I listened to it twice. Not once did he ask if I was okay. Not once did he apologize for what happened at the wedding. Not once did he acknowledge that his wife publicly humiliated me in front of our entire family and friend circle. Just concern for the resort, for Jessica. I deleted the message. Then came the text. From Jessica. "You've made your point. Grow up." This is pathetic. No greeting, No signature. Just poison. I stared at the screen for a long time, then replied, "The only pathetic thing is thinking you could spit on the hand that paid for your fantasy. Actions have consequences. Consider this your first lesson in adulthood." I turned off my phone. Let the silence grow roots. The next morning, David from the event planning team called. He sounded nervous. Mrs. Patterson. I just wanted to clarify, should we still submit the remaining invoice to your address or... Send it to them, I said. It's their event now. He understood immediately. You got it. And just so you know, we saw what happened at the reception. You carried yourself with grace. Not many would have handled it like that. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen and looked around. At the walls, I painted myself. The table I bought secondhand and refinished with Gary. The photos on the fridge of Nathan as a baby, a teen, a graduate. And then I said it out loud for no one but me. No one gets to humiliate me in a room I built. And they certainly don't get to keep the gifts I gave them after they throw me out. The first real crack didn't show up in Nathan's voice. It showed up in his silence. 3 days after the wedding, I got an email from the resort's concierge. A forwarded message. Subject line, urgent guest complaint. Jessica had apparently arrived at the front desk expecting a celebratory honeymoon suite, only to be told the reservation had been canceled. No ocean view, no chilled champagne, no luxury linens, just a standard double room they managed to scrape together at the last minute with no spa appointments or prepaid excursions. The email contained her exact words. My mother-in-law is clearly suffering from emotional instability and should not be allowed access to travel accounts. This is harassment. I stared at it, not even angry, just stunned by the audacity. I had spent months, making sure every detail of that trip was perfect. Not for her, for Nathan. Because I believed he deserved a good start. But this wasn't a start. It was a manipulation in a white dress. I didn't respond to the resort. Didn't need to. But I printed the email, slipped it into my file folder, titled that section Deflection and Damage Control. The next crack came in Nathan's text. No greeting. Just, "Why are you doing this?" I stared at the blinking cursor, and for a moment I didn't know what to say, but then I remembered how he looked at me that night, how he didn't move when she told me to leave, how he didn't speak up, didn't stand up. So I replied, "You should be asking why she thought it was okay to treat me that way." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. He didn't text again. Later that day, the band's manager called, said they hadn't been paid, asked if I'd be settling the balance. I told them the truth. I was removed from the event by the bride. "You'll need to direct future billing to them." There was a pause. Then a soft understanding. Ah. Word was spreading. Not because I said anything, but because Jessica's tantrum wasn't as private as she'd thought. One of the bridesmaids messaged me on Facebook. "Hi, Mrs. Patterson. I just wanted to say I'm really sorry about what happened. It wasn't right. A few of us tried to talk to her afterward, but she told us to mind our own business. Just know people noticed. That was all it said. No gossip, no judgment. Just confirmation. People were waking up. Even Nathan's best friend Marcus stopped by unannounced. He stood on my porch with a 6-pack of soda and a sheepish look. I heard he said, I didn't invite him in, but I stood there, waiting. She said you stormed out, but that's not what I saw. I said nothing. He shifted on his feet. Nate's been not himself. For a long time now. I wanted to believe it was just stress, but something about her always felt off. Still, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. "You were the one who paid for that whole thing, right?" he asked. I nodded once. He exhaled. "Unreal." Then before he turned to go, he said quietly, "If you ever need help setting the record straight. I've got receipts too." I didn't respond. But later I wrote his name on the back of my notepad. People were starting to come around. Not because I demanded it, but because when someone burns every bridge, eventually the smoke becomes impossible to ignore. That weekend, Jessica's Instagram posts slowed. The carefully curated reels, the glamorous couple shots, the perfect honeymoon moments. They stopped. And then came a cryptic quote. "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." The irony wasn't lost on me. By Monday, my phone buzzed again. "Nathan." This time he called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. His voice cracked halfway through. "Mom, I don't know what's happening. Jessica's been saying things. I just need to talk to you." He paused. "I didn't know she canceled the bridal shower invite." "I swear, I thought you chose not to come." There it was, the moment the mask started to slip. I didn't call back. Not yet. Instead, I sent him an email. Short. To the point. "I'm happy to talk, but not while you're still in denial. When you're ready to have a conversation based on truth, not defense, I'm here." Because I'd spent too many years biting my tongue. Too many hours convincing myself that staying quiet was the noble thing to do. But silence wasn't noble. It was just a slower form of surrender. And I wasn't surrendering anymore. That night I sat on the porch and looked through the wedding folder one last time. Crossed off the final payment I wouldn't be making. Then I wrote a new title at the top of the last page. Closure, because that's what this was. Not revenge. Just a quiet return to balance. The kind you earn by surviving people who expect you to keep giving even after they throw you out. I didn't expect him to show up, but he did. On a Tuesday, early evening. Just after dinner, when the sky was still flushed with that soft pink light and the birds were making their last pass before dusk. I was outside watering the hydrangeas. The old ones, the ones I'd planted when Nathan was still in middle school. The ones he helped dig holes for, grumbling the whole time but smiling when I handed him a root-covered mess and said, "We'll make something beautiful out of this." I heard his car door shut. Then footsteps on the walkway. I didn't turn right away, just kept watering. When I finally looked up, he was standing there in his work clothes, creased slacks, button down, wrinkled in that way that says you've been sitting in your own thoughts for too long. "Hi," he said. I nodded, turned off the hose. Silence stretched between us, but not the painful kind. The kind that holds weight, that makes room for truth. "I shouldn't have let her say that to you," he said, voice low. Gravelly. Still I said nothing. He shifted, looked down. "I should have stopped her. I should have... I don't know." I froze. "Yes," I said finally. "You did." He flinched. But he didn't argue. "I've been thinking," he said, "about everything. The way things changed, how I changed. I waited. I let her isolate me," he continued. "From you, from my friends, from the people who raised me right." I crossed my arms. "Why?" He ran a hand through his hair, exhaled. Because it was easier. Honesty. Finally, she made everything sound like it was my choice. Like I was taking control. Like I was being a man. But I wasn't leading, I was following. He looked up at me then, eyes red. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't matter, but because I needed to be clear and strong, because too many apologies are just noise. But this one, it rang true. You hurt me, I said. Not just at the wedding. For months before that. You disappeared, Nathan. You left without leaving. He nodded. I know. And when she told me to get out, I realized I'd already been gone in your eyes for a long time. He swallowed. I want to fix this, he said. No, I said softly. You want to feel better. He blinked. There's a difference, I added. Fixing it means you sit in it. You understand it. You earn your way back. Feeling better is what you do when you skip the hard part. He looked like he'd been slapped, but he didn't retreat. I'm ready to earn it, he said after a beat. Whatever that looks like. I walked past him toward the porch, then start with listening. He followed me up the steps. We sat in the old chairs Gary built before he passed, the ones with the uneven arms and creaky legs. I need to tell you something, I said. He nodded. I told him everything. About the payments, the cancellations, the conversations I'd had with vendors, the resort, the dress, the trust account I'd frozen. He didn't interrupt once, just sat there absorbing. When I finished, I leaned back. He rubbed his face with both hands. She told me it was all taken care of, he said. Said her parents were covering things I couldn't. I said nothing. Because what else was there to say? He looked out at the yard. You know, I kept thinking the honeymoon felt off, he muttered. No ocean view. No champagne? She said it was the resort's fault. I raised an eyebrow. She blamed you. He nodded slowly. She said you were unstable, that you wanted attention, and you believed her. He closed his eyes. I didn't want to, but I didn't question her either, which is the same thing. He nodded again. Quiet. Still. You didn't protect me, I said. You didn't protect the one person who spent her whole life protecting you. He looked broken, and maybe he needed to be, to see what he'd allowed, what he'd co-signed even by silence. What now, he asked. I stood up. You don't get to ask that yet. He looked up at me, hurt flashing across his face. You don't rebuild a bridge until you figure out why you burned it in the first place. I want to see you again, he said. I want things to be okay. I believe that, I said, but I don't trust it yet. He nodded. I'll earn it, he repeated. You'll try. I corrected. And that's where we'll begin. He stood too, hesitated. Can I come by next week? Ask me again then? He didn't argue, didn't beg, just nodded and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away, not with sadness, not with hope, just peace, because truth had been spoken, and that's where healing starts, not in hugs, but in honesty. The first Sunday after Nathan came by, I didn't set the table. For years, Sunday had been our ritual pasta night garlic bread, my mother's roasted tomato sauce that simmered on the stove for hours. It didn't matter what kind of week we'd had. Sunday was ours. But now I left the plates in the cupboard. I didn't text him. I didn't remind him. I waited to see if he'd show up again. He didn't. But the next day, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No postage. Just my name written in Nathan's familiar looping handwriting. Inside was a letter. Mom, I know it's not enough, but I needed you to hear it this way. I let someone rewrite who I was. I let her decide how I saw you, and I let you stand alone when you should have been standing beside me. Thank you for everything you did, even the things I didn't see. Especially the things I didn't see. I'm working on getting clear, on being the man you raised. I love you. Nathan. I sat on the porch and read it twice. Then I folded it neatly and slid it into the drawer next to Gary's watch and the tiny pair of baby socks I'd kept from Nathan's first day home. Words matter, but patterns matter more, and I'd need to see a new pattern before I let those words mean something. The aftermath of that wedding didn't unfold in fire. It unraveled in silence. Jessica went quiet online. No more wife life hashtags. No more curated smiles. Just a birthday shout out to one of her girlfriends and a repost of a quote about outgrowing negativity. I could almost hear her spinning a new version of the story. That's what people like her do. They don't self-reflect. They self-market. A week later, I got a call from Nathan again. He asked if he could stop by, said he wasn't expecting anything, just wanted to say hello. I said yes. This time when he arrived, he didn't bring guilt. He brought groceries. He knew what I liked: red onions, that soft cheese from the deli. I always splurged on a bag of lemons for my tea. He made pasta while I set the table, and halfway through dinner he said it. We're not okay, but I want to get there. I nodded. That's all I ask. I didn't bring up Jessica. He did. She's angry, he said, stirring his sauce a little too hard. She thinks you've poisoned me. I laughed. If I had that kind of power, I would have used it when you were 12 and refused to eat vegetables. He smiled, then went quiet. I'm starting to see her mom, for who she really is. That's your journey, I said gently. Not mine. But she hurt you. She hurt us. But the real wound came from you pretending it didn't matter. He didn't argue, just sat with it. Let it sting. After dinner, we washed dishes together. Like we used to, he told me about work, about Marcus and how he'd reached out, about how embarrassed he felt. You were trying to give me everything he said, and I let her turn that into something to be ashamed of. You didn't protect me, I said again. But worse, you let her decide I wasn't worth protecting. He nodded. I see that now. I handed him the towel, watched as he dried the dishes one by one. He didn't ask to stay, didn't try to hug me goodbye. He just said, "Thank you for dinner, Mom," and left. That night I felt a strange mixture of sadness and hope, because rebuilding is harder than revenge. It takes patience, courage, boundaries, and silence doesn't mean peace until it's chosen. A few days later, I got another letter. Not from Nathan, from Jessica. Typed. 3 paragraphs. Cold. She accused me of manipulating the narrative, of stealing attention from their wedding. She blamed me for the canceled payments, the social whispers, the embarrassment her family now felt. At the bottom, she wrote, "If you wanted to ruin my life, congratulations. You succeeded." I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I tore it in half, then into quarters, dropped it in the trash. She still didn't get it. This wasn't about revenge. This was about returning to center. She had taken my generosity, twisted it into leverage, and then set it on fire. All I did was take my hands away, let her burn it without my fuel. That weekend, Nathan called again, asked if he could take me to lunch. I said yes. This time he brought me a book he thought I'd like. One we used to read when he was young, an old edition he found online and ordered. Inside he'd written, "To the woman who never left me, even when I left her." I closed the book, let my hands rest on the cover. I didn't say I forgive you. Not yet, but I smiled. And that was enough for now. Jessica didn't take the unraveling quietly. I knew she wouldn't. People like her never collapse in private, they need an audience. And when they lose control of the narrative, they start rewriting it with whatever scraps they can find. It started with her parents. 2 weeks after Nathan's second visit, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. It was her mother. "Hello, Evelyn. I'm reaching out because I think it's time we have a woman-to-woman conversation. There's been a lot of unnecessary conflict. The past is the past. Perhaps we can meet for coffee and clear the air. No apology, no mention of what her daughter said to me in front of 100 people. Just smooth, practiced diplomacy. The kind that sounds like peace, but only if you agree to forget how the war started." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Nathan came by the next day. He looked exhausted. Not just tired in his eyes, tired in his soul. "She's unraveling," he said. I poured him coffee. "She's telling everyone that you're trying to break up the marriage, that you've turned me against her, that you threatened to sue." I raised an eyebrow. "Sue?" He rubbed his face. "I know. It's ridiculous. What did you say to her? I told her I don't need anyone to tell me what I've seen with my own eyes." He looked up at me then. Clear. Honest. "And I told her that what she did to you wasn't just wrong, it was unforgivable until she makes it right." I nodded slowly. "And what did she say?" She packed a bag. There it was, the fallout finally falling. "She went to stay with her sister," he added. "Said she needed space from all the toxicity." I sipped my coffee. "Toxicity," I echoed. "How convenient." He gave a dry laugh. "Yeah. What do you want to do now?" He hesitated. "I'm not sure." "That's good," I said. He looked confused. "Not being sure is better than being sure for the wrong reasons," I explained. "You were so sure about her, so certain she loved you the way you needed to be loved. Maybe now you'll leave room for questions." He nodded. "I'm starting therapy," he said quietly. "Already had the intake call." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "That's the bravest thing you've said yet." He left later that afternoon, and I sat in my quiet house feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Not satisfaction, not revenge, but movement. Real honest movement. And then the messages started. Friends, cousins, acquaintances. All of them with some version of the same story Jessica was telling people. I ruined the wedding, that I canceled payments out of jealousy, that I showed up late, that I embarrassed her, that I made a scene. I didn't respond, but I kept the screenshots, every single one. People kept forwarding them to me, some with disbelief, others with subtle warnings. And still, I said nothing. Because when someone tells lie after lie, they eventually forget who they lied to, and that's when the truth gets louder than anything you could say. Then came the moment I knew was coming, a knock on my door. Jessica. hair pulled back, no makeup, hoodie and leggings instead of pearls and posture. She didn't look humbled. She looked exposed. "Can we talk?" she said. I didn't invite her in. We stood on the porch, like two people at the edge of a property neither one of us owned anymore. "I know you hate me," she began. "I don't," I said simply. She blinked. "I don't hate you. I see you." "That's worse." She swallowed. "I made mistakes," she said. "We both did. No, I said. You made choices, and Nathan allowed them." She folded her arms. "I was under a lot of pressure. We all were," I replied. "I buried my husband, raised a son alone, worked 3 jobs some years, and never once did I use pain as an excuse to mistreat someone." She stared at me. "This isn't about money," I continued, "or canceled honeymoons, or missed Instagram posts. This is about dignity. You took mine, publicly, and now you want me to forget that because the story isn't going your way." She stepped back. "I didn't come here to fight. No. You came here to regain control." Her lips tightened. "I want to save my marriage," she said finally. I nodded. "Then save it. But not by pretending you didn't burn the house down and hand me the match." She stood there unsure of what to say next. I took a breath. "You want me to forgive you?" She nodded quickly. "You want my help fixing this?" More nodding. "Then you need to start with my son." "Not me." She looked confused. "He's the one who has to live with your shadow. I'm not in it anymore." I turned and walked back inside, closed the door. And for the first time since the wedding, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. I felt like the homeowner again. Nathan didn't mention Jessica's visit until 4 days later. We were sitting at the cafe near my neighborhood park, the same one where I used to take him for ice cream after school on Fridays. He looked different that day. Tired, yes, but clearer. Like someone who just cleaned fog off a window and was finally seeing the mess inside. "She told me she stopped by," he said, stirring the sugar into his coffee slowly. I nodded. "She did. She said you shut the door in her face." "No," I said calmly. "I told her the truth." She closed it with her own silence. He looked away. "She's not doing well," he said. I tilted my head. "And how are you doing?" He paused, then looked back at me. "Better," he said. "I'm seeing things now that I didn't want to see before." I waited. "She makes everything about her. Even my healing feels like a betrayal to her." "And what do you want?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, exhaled. "I want to stop shrinking myself to make other people comfortable." That line, it hit me hard, because that was the life I'd lived too. Decades of making myself smaller to avoid confrontation to keep the peace to be easy to love. And here was my son finally recognizing it in himself. "That's a good place to start," I said. He hesitated, then pulled out an envelope. "This came for you," he said. It was a letter. From Jessica. I didn't take it. "You read it?" He nodded. "She says she's sorry. Says she didn't understand what she was doing. That she thought she was protecting me from whatever image of you she created in her head." I raised an eyebrow. "Did she apologize to you?" He nodded again. Slower this time. Said she used her fear to justify cruelty. Said she never expected me to question her because I never had before. I looked at him carefully. "And what are you going to do with that apology?" He folded the envelope in half, slid it back into his pocket. I told her I needed time. Real time. Not 2 days of space and then a list of demands. And what did she say? She cried. Then she blamed me. Then she cried again. That said enough. And how did you respond? I asked. I told her I loved her, he said, but I wasn't sure I liked the version of me I'd become with her. A hard truth, the kind that costs something. I reached across the table and took his hand. You're growing, I said. He blinked fast, like he wasn't sure whether to smile or cry. I'm scared, he whispered. I know. Of losing her. I know. But I'm more scared of losing myself. That was the first time he'd said it out loud. And I knew then that we were really starting over. Because regret can be loud. But clarity, that stays. The rest of the week was quiet. I went about my routines. Morning walks. Volunteering at the library. Dinner for one. But I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt intact. Then came the family dinner. Not mine. Jessica's. Nathan called after. They cornered me, he said. All of them. Her parents, her aunt, even her older brother. I braced myself. They said I needed to cut ties with you, that you were poisoning the marriage, that you were jealous, controlling. And what did you say? I told them I wouldn't choose between my wife and my mother, but I would choose between truth and fiction. My heart swelled. That's a hard stand to take, I said. They said I'd regret it. Do you know? He said quietly. Because I think the biggest regret would have been letting them make me someone I'm not. The next day I got a handwritten note from Jessica. No envelope. Just slipped under my front door. 2 sentences. I don't understand you, but I see now that I never tried to. I read it 3 times, then folded it. I didn't respond, because not every note deserves an answer. Sometimes the lesson is in being heard and sitting with what echoes back. Later that evening, I stood in the doorway of Nathan's old room. The childhood posters, the trophies, the old bookshelf still stuffed with worn-out chapter books. I sat on his bed, ran my hand across the comforter, and whispered, "We made it, baby." Not because the story was over, but because we'd turned the page. Together. It wasn't a grand moment, no dramatic exit, no fiery final fight, no public statement with rings left on the table. It was smaller than that. Nathan called one morning. His voice sounded calm, resolved. She moved out, he said. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, watching the steam curl like a ribbon. She packed her things last night and left. No shouting. No demands. Just bags and silence. I didn't ask where she went. I didn't ask if it was permanent. I just asked, "How are you?" There was a pause. Then lighter. And that said everything. I didn't celebrate. Didn't say I told you so. Because it wasn't about being right. It was about Nathan finally seeing, really seeing the cost of a love built on manipulation. He didn't go to work that day. Instead, he showed up at my house with 2 bags of groceries and a new book under his arm. He cooked. We ate. And then we sat in the living room, no TV on, no distractions. Just the sounds of the house, the creak of the old vents, the occasional bark from a neighbor's dog, the hum of a life slowly returning to itself. He told me more. About the small things he had ignored for too long. How Jessica checked his messages when he showered. How she guilted him into canceling plans with his friends. how she'd withhold affection, then blame him for the distance. And the worst, she told me once he said quietly that I'd never really been loved until I met her. I looked at him then, my boy grown but bruised in places he hadn't even known were wounds. And I said it clearly. You were loved long before she came along, and you'll be loved long after she's gone. He nodded. A single tear ran down his cheek. I reached over, wiped it away with the back of my hand. Love isn't supposed to shrink you, I said. It's supposed to hold space for you. That night he stayed in the guest room. The room that used to be his, back when he was little and afraid of thunderstorms. Back when I'd sit on the edge of his bed and hum until his breathing evened out. And now he was breathing evenly again. The next morning we had breakfast together. He made scrambled eggs, burned the toast. We laughed about it like we hadn't laughed in years. When he left, he hugged me tightly. Thanks for waiting for me, he said. And I whispered, I never stopped. In the weeks that followed, Jessica did what I expected. She tried to reclaim her version of the story. There were cryptic social media posts. She never liked me. He's not who I thought he was. I gave everything and got nothing in return. She even texted me once. You won. Happy now I didn't respond. Because I hadn't won anything. This wasn't a game. This was the slow, painful return to truth. And the truth is, sometimes love is loud and bright and shiny, and sometimes it's quiet, patient. It doesn't chase. It waits. And when Nathan finally came back to me, not as a boy needing protection, but as a man seeking clarity, it wasn't revenge. It was restoration. He started therapy in earnest. Told me he wanted to take time before rushing into anything new. I need to know who I am outside of her, he said. I told him, you've always known. You just forgot. He began calling more, coming by just to say hello, asking questions about Gary, his father, wanting to understand where he came from. We talked about the good days, the hard ones, the way I used to cry in the shower because it was the only place he wouldn't hear me. He looked at me then with new eyes. You were stronger than I ever realized, he said. I smiled. You weren't supposed to realize it back then. You were supposed to feel safe, and now he did. The final thread came loose when Jessica's mother sent a message, polite, polished, passive. We regret how things unfolded. It's a shame we couldn't maintain a positive relationship for the children's sake. I read it 3 times, then deleted it. Because maintaining a relationship built on denial isn't noble. It's dishonest, and I'd lived too much truth to go back to pretend. Nathan didn't ask me for advice about the divorce papers. He just told me he'd signed them, clean, quick, no drama. I said I'm proud of you. He said I'm proud of me too. And that was the real victory. Not that he left her. Not that she didn't get what she wanted, but that he came home to himself. The quiet that came after the divorce was unlike any silence I'd known before. It wasn't the cold, empty quiet of being left out. It wasn't the sharp quiet of shame or the tense hush of walking on eggshells. It was peace. Nathan didn't move back in. He didn't need to, but he came by every Sunday, without being asked, without being reminded, and this time he brought things. A pie from the bakery down the road, a book he'd just finished, a puzzle we worked on over tea, not gifts, not offerings of guilt, just presents. The kind of presents you only give when you're finally settled in your own skin again. He still wore the ring for a while. Out of habit, he said. Then one day it was gone. He didn't announce it. didn't give a speech. It just wasn't there anymore. Like a wound that finally stopped bleeding. Jessica didn't disappear entirely. She stayed on the edges of things. Friends of friends, mutual contacts. People who'd once called themselves family now spoke in past tense. I saw a photo of her once on someone's Facebook page. She looked the same. Hair perfect, smile wide. But there was something behind her eyes. That look people get when they've built a house out of mirrors and can't find the door. Nathan told me she texted him once. Not to apologize. Not really. Just one line. We could have had something beautiful. He didn't reply. He showed me the message, though. Not to brag, but because he wanted me to see what he'd chosen not to carry anymore. I think that's the saddest part, he said. She really believed beauty meant controlling everything. I nodded. Beauty without kindness is just decoration, I said. That made him smile. Then came the day he showed up with a small wooden box. This is for you, he said, handing it over like it weighed more than it looked. Inside was a photo, one I hadn't seen in years. Nathan, about 5 years old, sitting on Gary's shoulders, both of them laughing. And me standing to the side, hands on my hips, mid-laugh, mouth open, sun catching my cheek. I gasped. Where did you find this? In the garage, he said. I was going through some of my old boxes. There was a note beneath the photo. Just a simple card. You were always the foundation. I'm sorry I forgot that. That was the first time I cried in front of him in months. Not a tear or two. A full body-shaking sob. He didn't panic. Didn't try to fix it. He just held my hand. Sat with me in it. That's when I knew we were whole again. Not perfect. Not the same as before. But whole. Jessica filed for a name change a few weeks after that. Dropped his last name. Started going by her maiden name again, though now it was more of a brand. She'd started a blog. Something about healing and high-value living. I didn't read it. Didn't care to. But someone forwarded me a post once. The headline read, What to do when they turn their son against you. I didn't click. Because you only need to defend yourself if you're still in the fight. And I wasn't. I was done. One afternoon, I walked through the old park where I used to take Nathan as a boy, watched the children playing, the parents chasing behind them. One little girl fell and scraped her knee. Her mother rushed over, soothing, wiping, hugging. The girl wailed anyway, but she let herself be held. That's what love is. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of someone who stays through it. I sat on a bench and whispered something I hadn't let myself say in years. I did a good job. Not perfect, not easy, but good. And that was enough, because I hadn't just raised a son. I'd raised a man who came back, not because I asked, but because he remembered who held him when he fell. It was a quiet Saturday evening when I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not waiting for another apology, not waiting for Nathan to call, not waiting for someone to hand me back the dignity that was always mine to begin with. The healing had already happened. It hadn't arrived like thunder. It crept in softly like the smell of warm bread from the oven or the gentle creak of the front door opening at just the right time. That night, I hosted dinner at my house. Just a few people. Nathan, of course. Marcus came too with his new girlfriend. A sweet woman who actually asked if she could bring something. She brought wine and offered to help with dishes. I nearly cried. 2 of my cousins sat at the end of the table talking about gardening and grandchildren and how fast the years slip through your fingers. The house felt full again. Not just with people, but with belonging, with safety. After dinner, Nathan stayed behind while the others left. He helped me clean up, humming an old tune his father used to sing while wiping down the counter. When we finished, we sat in the living room. The lights were low, the air was still. And then he said it. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me." I looked at him, at the man he'd become, at the pieces that had once been scattered now slowly finding their place again. "You were never lost," I said, "just in a place I couldn't follow." He nodded. "I see that now." We sat there for a while, not speaking, just breathing the same air in a house that had once echoed with absence and now felt like home again. I thought of Jessica sometimes, not with bitterness, with curiosity, where she'd gone, who she'd become, what story she was telling herself to sleep at night. But I didn't feel anger anymore, only clarity. She was a chapter, one with jagged edges, but not the end of the story, not even close. Nathan began dating again eventually, carefully, slowly. He asked questions he never would have asked before. What does respect look like to you? What do you need when you're overwhelmed? What does together actually mean? He learned to listen. He learned to apologize without trying to fix everything in the next breath. He learned to be his own man, one not made in the image of someone else's need to control. And me, I learned that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors, with locks, and not everyone gets a key. I started a small book club at the library, started walking every morning, made new friends, kept old ones closer, and every once in a while I'd look at the mirror and say, "You made it, with your dignity intact." Because I did. I really did. And it wasn't because I fought. It was because I chose when not to. Because I chose silence when silence spoke louder. Because I chose truth over vengeance. Because I chose myself after too many years of shrinking, bending, softening, so others could shine. At the next Sunday dinner, Nathan gave me a framed photo. Us. At the park, he'd taken it on his phone, printed it, and found a frame that looked like the one that used to sit in our old hallway. Inside, he'd added a small inscription. "To the woman who never left, even when I did." I put it on the mantle, next to Gary's photo, next to the candle I light every night. And when I turned out the lights that night, I stood at the center of my home, my rules, my peace, and finally my closure.